The year was 1859, and the house breathed like a living thing. Timbers sighing, floors whispering secrets into the soles of boots. He learned early that the walls listened. They had heard the verdict before he did, spoken low in his father's study where the lamplight made a blade of every shadow. Unfit. The word settled into him like a winter nail. Not sick, not broken, merely useless to the arithmetic of blood, a sum that would not carry. His father believed in measures. Width of shoulders, firmness of jaw, the look a man gave the horizon. By those measures, the boy failed. He watched from the hallway as decisions hardened, as a ledger closed with a soft, final sound. What followed was not rage but logistics. In a world built on ownership, solutions were owned too. They chose the strongest woman because strength frightened them. She worked the fields with a back like a bow drawn too long, eyes steady as river stones. People spoke of her in the careful way reserved for storms. Never naming, always counting distance. When she passed the boy in the yard, she did not look at him. He felt that absence more keenly than any stare. The house rearranged itself around her presence, as if bracing. What happened next was done without witnesses, but nothing here required eyes to be seen. The nights thickened. The wind learned new paths through the eaves. The boy felt himself moved like furniture, placed where a problem might be solved by pressure alone. He learned the sound of his own heart in his ears, the way fear tastes like iron. He learned that some doors close from the outside. When the child came, it arrived quietly, as if refusing to announce itself to a world that had planned it without mercy. The house held its breath. No bells, no cheers, only the murmurs, questions shaped like prayers and curses alike. The baby's cry cut once, clean and sharp, and then settled into a watchful hush. People leaned in, searching for signs: whose eyes, whose bones, whose temper. The woman named the child with a name that did not belong to the house. It tasted of earth and night rain. She carried the boy with an ease that dared anyone to interfere. In her silence, there was instruction. In her hands, a grammar of survival. The father watched from a distance, measuring again, uneasy now, as if the numbers had shifted while he wasn't looking. Years later, the boy would remember the way the house learned to fear what it had made. He would remember the ledger's soft close, and how some sums do not end, they wait. The first turning point begins not with violence, but with judgment, because in that world judgment carried the weight of law. The father's verdict did not arrive as an explosion. It came as a calculation. He examined his son the way he examined land, livestock, and ledgers, searching for yield. Every gesture, every hesitation, every softness became evidence. In a society where legacy was currency, the boy's perceived weakness was not a personal flaw, but a financial loss. The father did not hate his son in the way stories often demand. Hatred would have been simpler. What he felt was disappointment sharpened into doctrine. The boy could not be trusted to extend the bloodline in a way that preserved dominance, and so the bloodline itself turned against him. This verdict stripped the boy of something more than dignity. It erased his future before he had language to describe it. He learned that worth was conditional, that love bent easily under the weight of expectation. His father's authority was absolute, reinforced by law, custom, and the silent approval of men who shared his fears. To them, weakness was contagious. If allowed to persist, it could soften an entire lineage. The father framed his decision as necessity, not cruelty, convincing himself that survival required ruthless pruning. In doing so, he transformed parenthood into governance and blood into policy. The boy felt the shift immediately, though no one explained it to him. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. Hands that once rested on his shoulder withdrew. His name, once spoken with familiarity, became an inconvenience. This quiet exile was more damaging than open rejection, because it taught him that he could be discarded without ceremony. He began to understand that his father's power did not come from strength alone, but from the ability to define reality for everyone beneath him. If the father said the boy was unfit, then unfit became truth. What makes this moment pivotal is that the father's verdict does not simply condemn the boy, it sets the machinery of the story in motion. By deciding that his son is a dead end, the father opens a darker path, one where human lives become tools for correction. The boy's body is no longer his own, because it has been reassigned a purpose that serves the father's fear of decline. Lineage, once a promise, becomes a weapon wielded against him. The father believes he is preserving order, but in reality he is destabilizing everything he claims to protect. This judgment also exposes the moral rot beneath respectability. The father couches his decision in reason, tradition, and necessity. But those words mask a deeper terror of the fear of losing control. The boy's existence threatens the illusion that power can be perfectly inherited, that dominance is natural rather than enforced. By declaring his son unfit, the father attempts to erase that threat, unaware that such erasures leave scars that do not stay buried. The verdict marks the moment when blood stops meaning family and starts meaning strategy. When a father ceases to see his child and sees only a problem that must be solved, the second turning point unfolds in the aftermath of the decision, when the father's solution takes form and the household is forced to participate in a silence heavier than any outcry. The strongest enslaved woman is chosen not because of who she is, but because of what she represents. Her body is treated as proof of endurance, her survival mistaken for consent. The act itself is never spoken of openly, yet everyone understands what has been arranged. It is power expressing itself through inevitability, dressed up as practicality. The boy senses that something irreversible has been set in motion, something that no apology or explanation will ever reach. What follows is not immediate chaos, but an uneasy waiting. Time stretches, every day carrying the knowledge that a life may be forming under conditions that deny humanity to everyone involved. The woman continues her labor, shoulders squared, face unreadable, as if refusing the satisfaction of seeing her break. The boy is haunted by his own helplessness, aware that his body has been turned into an instrument without his permission, just as hers has. Their shared violation binds them in a way neither is allowed to name, creating a connection forged by coercion rather than choice. When the child is born, the household expects clarity, some confirmation that the father's calculation was correct. Instead, what arrives is uncertainty. The child does not fit cleanly into expectation or fear. There is no immediate sign of triumph, no obvious flaw to justify the cruelty that preceded it. This ambiguity unsettles everyone. Silence spreads because no one knows what the child means yet, and meaning is everything in a world obsessed with hierarchy. The father, who prides himself on foresight, finds himself without language for what he sees. The absence of celebration is as telling as mourning would have been. The birth produces not relief but dread, as though something has slipped past the rules that were meant to contain it. Rumors begin quietly, whispered among those who have nothing but whispers to protect themselves. Some say the child is ordinary, which in this context is terrifying. Others claim there is something watchful in the infant's eyes, an awareness that arrives too early. None of these stories are confirmed, but their existence alone destabilizes the house. For the boy, this moment is transformative because it fractures the narrative imposed on him. He was told he was unfit, yet here is evidence that defies that label. The child's existence becomes a question mark carved into his father's certainty. At the same time, the boy is burdened with guilty he does not know how to carry, understanding that his redemption, if it exists at all, has been purchased with someone else's suffering. The enslaved woman's silence becomes louder than accusation, a reminder that survival does not erase injustice. This turning point matters because it replaces expectation with unease. The father's plan does not deliver reassurance, it delivers a mystery that cannot be controlled or undone. The child stands as a living contradiction, born of domination yet refusing to behave as a mere outcome. From this moment on, the household is no longer stable, because the future it tried to engineer has introduced something it cannot fully understand or command. The third turning point takes shape not through action, but through rumor, because in closed worlds rumor becomes a form of truth. The child's presence unsettles the order of the house in ways that cannot be measured or punished, and so people begin to explain their discomfort with stories. Whispers move faster than commands, slipping through corridors, fields, and quarters, changing shape with every mouth they pass through. Some say the child is wrong in a way that cannot be named, that something in him resists the categories meant to define him. Others insist the opposite, claiming he carries a strength that does not announce itself, a quiet gravity that pulls attention without effort. None of these claims are proven, yet all of them matter. These rumors are born from fear, not curiosity. The household understands power only as something visible and enforceable, yet the child represents something subtler. He does not cry excessively. He does not demand. He watches. In a place where people survive by anticipating punishment, being watched feels dangerous. The enslaved woman senses this first. She keeps the child close, shielding him not only from hands, but from interpretation. She knows that once a story hardens, it becomes permission. The father hears the rumors last, filtered through layers of loyalty and caution. When they reach him, they arrive softened, disguised as concern rather than alarm. Even so, they strike at his confidence. He begins to question his own judgment, though he would never admit it. The child was meant to correct a flaw, to stabilize the future, yet instead he introduces uncertainty. The father finds himself unable to categorize what he sees, and this failure unsettles him more than rebellion ever could. Authority depends on clarity, and the child offers none. For the boy deemed unfit, the rumors create a strange reversal. He becomes both less and more than himself. To some, he is a warning, proof that defiance can take root even in controlled soil. To others, he is invisible, erased by the discomfort his existence provokes. The boy realizes that his fate is now entangled with the child's, bound by stories neither of them authored. He senses that the labels once used against him are shifting, rearranging themselves around this new presence. What makes this moment pivotal is that fear changes hands. Those who once felt secure begin to feel watched, measured, and exposed. The systems that relied on predictability start to tremble under the weight of uncertainty. The rumors do not accuse directly. They suggest, hint, and linger. They create a space where doubt can grow without being challenged. In that space, power loses its sharpness. The enslaved woman understands that rumors can kill as effectively as whips. She teaches the child stillness, restraint, the art of not inviting attention. These lessons are not about obedience but survival. Through her, the child learns that silence can be a shield as well as a prison. The boy observes this from a distance, recognizing in her care a resistance that does not announce itself. By the time the rumors have fully taken hold, the household has changed. People move differently, speak more carefully, and avoid looking too long at the child. Nothing tangible has occurred, yet everything feels altered. The future is no longer a straight line drawn by the father's hand, but a fog thick with possibility and threat, where even whispers carry the power to undo what was meant to be permanent. The fourth turning point emerges quietly through the enslaved woman's influence, not as a rebellion that announces itself, but as a steady reshaping of what the boy believes strength to be. She does not confront the house or challenge its rules openly, because open defiance would only confirm the stories already circling them. Instead, she teaches through presence and repetition, through the discipline of surviving each day intact. Her strength is not the spectacle people fear. It is the refusal to be reduced to what they expect. In her hands, endurance becomes intention. She raises the child with an awareness sharpened by necessity. Every movement has purpose. Every silence is chosen. She shows him how to listen without reacting, how to observe without inviting scrutiny. These lessons are not spoken as philosophy, but lived, demonstrated in the way she carries herself, in how she meets cruelty with restraint rather than collapse. The boy watches this education unfold and begins to understand that power does not always belong to those who wield it loudly. Sometimes it resides in those who outlast. For the boy once deemed unfit, this period becomes transformative. He starts to see his own perceived weakness differently, reframed through her example. What his father labeled as inadequacy begins to resemble sensitivity, perception, and ability to notice what others overlook. Under her quiet guidance, he learns that strength can be adaptive rather than aggressive. It does not need permission to exist. This realization unsettles him because it contradicts everything he was taught to believe about worth and inheritance. The woman never tells him what to think of his father, or the system that binds them both. She understands that imposed understanding is just another form of control. Instead, she offers the boy a way to endure without surrendering himself completely. She teaches him to choose when to bend and when to remain still, when to speak and when silence will cut deeper. These lessons form a counter-legacy, one that does not pass through blood alone, but through survival and care. As the child grows, the household begins to notice subtle changes. The boy moves with more certainty, less apology. The child carries himself with an ease that unsettles observers, not because he is defiant, but because he does not appear afraid. This confidence does not come from protection offered by the house, but from something internal, cultivated beyond its reach. The enslaved woman's influence becomes visible not through disruption, but through resilience. This turning point matters because it shifts the story's center of gravity. Fate is no longer dictated solely by the father's decisions or the house's rules. Another inheritance is taking shape, one that cannot be cataloged or controlled. The woman's quiet defiance plants a future that resists erasure, teaching the boy that identity does not have to be granted by those in power to be real. In learning from her, he begins to claim a strength that exists outside the definitions meant to limit him, a strength that does not ask to be recognized in order to endure. The fifth turning point arrives when the past, long buried beneath routine and denial, demands recognition, and the reckoning is not dramatic in the way stories often promise. It comes as pressure, accumulated and unavoidable, like a structure finally revealing the cracks it was built upon. The father senses it first, though he refuses to name it. The order he believed permanent begins to resist him. Small acts no longer produce expected outcomes. Obedience feels thinner. The house that once echoed his authority now seems to listen for something else. The boy stands at the center of this shift, no longer merely the subject of decisions made by others. Time has given him awareness, and awareness has sharpened into choice. He understands now that inheritance is not a single path, but a crossroads. One road carries his father's legacy of control, calculation, and fear, a legacy that promises safety only if he continues the same harm that shaped him. The other road is uncertain, shaped by the woman's lessons, by silence used as armor and patience used as defiance. Choosing between them is not abstract, it requires loss either way. The enslaved woman knows this moment is coming long before anyone else. She has lived her life anticipating consequences, understanding that survival always demands a cost. She does not push the boy toward a decision because she knows coercion too well. Instead, she prepares him to endure whatever choice he makes. Her strength, once used against her, has become the foundation on which another future might stand. She has taught him how to face consequences without surrendering his humanity. When the reckoning finally surfaces, it exposes the lie at the heart of the father's authority. His power was never absolute. It relied on belief, fear, and compliance. As those weaken, so does he. The boy sees his father not as an immovable force, but as a man shaped by terror of decline. This understanding does not soften what was done, but it clarifies it. The boy realizes that repeating his father's path would not grant him freedom, only a different position within the same cage. The child born of coercion becomes a mirror, reflecting the cost of every decision that preceded him. His existence insists on accountability. He is living evidence that actions cannot be sealed off from their consequences, no matter how powerful the hand that set them in motion. The boy recognizes that to deny this truth would be to inherit the same blindness that justified his own erasure. This turning point matters because it transforms the story from one of survival into one of agency. The boy is no longer defined solely by what was done to him, but by what he chooses to carry forward. The reckoning does not offer justice in neat proportions, nor does it undo harm, but it forces a decision that cannot be postponed. In facing it, the boy steps out of the shadow of imposed identity and into a future shaped not by fear or blood alone, but by an understanding of what must end so that something else can begin. The father ages suddenly, not in years but in relevance. His authority thins as people begin to look past him rather than toward him. He sees the change and understands it too late. What he tried to engineer has escaped his design. The boy he declared unfit no longer seeks permission, and that is the final loss of control. There is no confrontation between them worthy of legend. Only a moment of recognition, brief and devastating, when the father realizes that legacy cannot be forced without consequence. The enslaved woman does not live to see freedom named as such, but she lives to see something rarer. She sees the boy choose differently. She sees him refuse to turn pain into policy. When she dies, it is quietly, as she lived, leaving behind no written proof of her strength, only its effects. The child carries her lessons forward, not as memory alone, but as practice. The boy leaves the house, not in chains, not in triumph, but with purpose. He takes the child with him, not as proof of anything, but as responsibility. Together they step into a world that offers no guarantees, only possibility. The past does not vanish behind them, it follows, heavy and unresolved. But it no longer decides the future on its own. Years later, stories circulate about the house and the man who once ruled it. Some claim it fell into ruin. Others say it still stands hollow and unused. No one agrees, because its fate no longer matters. What matters is that its power ended not with rebellion, but with refusal. The boy is remembered differently depending on who tells the story. Some say he was weak and vanished. Others say he carried something dangerous and took it away with him. The truth is quieter than either version. He learned that strength does not have to announce itself, that inheritance can be interrupted, and that endings are not always loud. Sometimes they are simply walked away from,